Hey, what's up, everybody? Chad Calek here, and welcome back to the In a Crowded Room podcast, where we are going to talk about a few things during this podcast. But first off, I just want to say it feels good to be back recording a podcast for all of you. As many of you know, I have been working my butt off in pre-production for Harbingers, which we are filming in March. I am so excited about this film. As we get closer and closer to principal photography, which right now looks like it's going to be March 9th, I will be leaking more and more details, which there's a lot of them. There's a lot of exciting things about this film. The biggest thing I keep talking about, and I'm so excited about this, is the scope and the scale of this film is just so much bigger than anything that I've ever done. And it's something that I've wanted to do for such a long time. And finally, I'm going to get the opportunity to, which is incredibly exciting. And to Thomas, to Justin, to everybody, my team, everyone, man, it just feels good to be a part of something that everybody is excited about. And this one means a lot to me. It's very, very important to me personally, and I think it's going to be very touching to everybody. It's extremely dark, I can tell you that much. Although it is definitely a paranormal documentary, it is not a ghost hunting film at all. The easiest way that I could explain it is that this is very much a story that's a mystery about good versus evil. If you've ever been through something that seems incredibly horrible and you've endured it and you came out of the other end of it and you look back and you go, man, was that just something that happened or was there more to that? A lot of times there is more to that. And that's all I'm going to say for now. I know that sounds kind of like some riddle, but I promise you this is going to be unlike anything you've ever seen, and I definitely think it's going to be the most terrifying thing that I've ever done. So I'm really excited about that. But since our last podcast, when you guys all heard from Craig Powell, I do have an update, and it's super frustrating. So right after we did the podcast, in which Craig said, hey, I still do have access to my Facebook. You guys can send me messages there. Well, Craig's Facebook was hacked. And he's no longer an administrator. So this is somebody who did it on purpose, and they're doing it to mess with them. So he could go on his page, and he could leave comments, but he can't get through the back door, so he can't respond to messages and things like that. Which is just incredibly frustrating. And, I feel for Craig. I've definitely dealt with my own weirdness, and there's a lot of things you guys do and don't know, and we've been documenting it this whole time. But whoever is messing with Craig is doing it, man, consistently, and they're doing a very good job of scaring the entire family. And I really hope this isn't somebody that's just listening, that's a hacker and just wants to mess around with Craig. And because listen, that's very possible. A lot of this stuff could be just people with a very sick and twisted sense of humor, for all I know. I don't think that to be the case, but I just feel for Craig, guys. And, to get a text message and be like, hey, I had one last line of communication as far as communicating with the public, and that's now been hacked too. That's unfortunate, man. That's really unfortunate. So he's already messaged Facebook to get his access back and to try to get online again. So I will let you guys know as soon as he is. I know a lot of you enjoyed the podcast with Craig, and I've already received messages of people saying, please have him back on again. Of course we will. Absolutely. Craig, I can tell you, is going to be a part of Harbingers, which I'm super excited about. As I've also said, Taddy, Heather Taddy, the wonderful and talented Heather Taddy from Alien Highway and Paranormal State, she is going to be a part of Harbingers. And there's definitely a few more names that I will leak a little bit later that you will know that are going to be in Harbingers as well. So hopefully that's some good news for Craig too. I know we always get excited when we can work together. He's not going to be able to make it over here due to complications with COVID and work and all that stuff. And it's still not, things are still pretty weird over there in Australia in regard to COVID. Which kind of brings me to PALEFACE. I just want to let everybody know, again, I've addressed this in comments on social media. The final episode, PALEFACE, is absolutely going to happen. It's already been happening. We've been documenting everything that's happened since Phantom Rider. But to truly bring the story full circle, I have to be able to go to Australia. And Craig would also have to be able to come to here. And like, for example, we just looked into potentially bringing Craig over here for Harbingers. And not only does he have to be fully vaccinated, but he would be able to come over here. But if he were to fly back into Australia, he couldn't even fly back in to Sydney. He would have to go to Brisbane. And then once he's there, he would have to quarantine at a government facility for 14 days. And then if he tested negative, he would have to fly back to Sydney. And then I believe there's a 3-day quarantine there. So it's super crazy over there. I know a lot of things are opening up, and they're opening up fast, which is great. But in order for us to go over there and finish this, look, we got to be able to get in and out of the country easily. You know, we got to clear up some of the stuff that's going on with Craig right now, as far as getting all of his phone, his computer, like all this stuff's got to work for him. You know, we definitely have to document that process of getting everything back for him. And, you know, we got to go to some pretty powerful places in government and otherwise, and some places that are pretty scary in which we would have to have security. So all of these are elements that have to kind of fall into place. As time moves forward, when we can go back over there, we will let you guys know for sure. But keep in mind, No-Face took almost 3 years. You know, Two-Face took, a couple years after that. I mean, you got to remember, in 2016, we were touring with No-Face. It's 2022 right now. So these things take time. It's not going to take 3 years or anything like that to do PALEFACE because, again, a lot of it has already been filmed. But it is going to take some time. But I can promise you it will be worth it. I think what makes our documentaries special is that they are real. I'm not sitting down and scripting the ending to PALEFACE or anything. That would be easy, but that's not how we do it. We document real life as it happens, and if it takes time to get to a resolution, then it takes time. So just hang in there. I can promise you it will be worth the wait. Just what we've filmed thus far and what we've documented it's chilling, man. It's real chilling. A lot of the things that we've been talking about, you'll get to see firsthand. And there's been a lot going on with this story that's been playing out in the public eye. And a lot of it is kind of being missed right now because of a lot of the political stuff that's going on and a lot of the stuff with Russia and Ukraine. And, man, it's just a dark time. It's a dark time. War is not what we need, COVID was bad enough. We definitely don't need, countries trying to take over other countries and getting the world wrapped up in all this. So, look, man, may cooler heads prevail and may everybody be as safe as they can be, and that dilemma that's going on right now. But at the same time, there are some really, really, really interesting stuff that's playing out right now in the UFO narrative. I mentioned to you in the last podcast that I have spoken with SKYFALL several times over the last several months. I don't want to lay out everything he said because, again, a lot of it's going to be in PALEFACE. But I did mention to you that he said, keep an eye on this Webb Telescope. And it's so interesting. For as long as I can remember, NASA avoided anything to do with anything extraterrestrial. And obviously the news did as well. It was just something that you were laughed at. You were absolutely laughed at if you brought it up. Well, after the last podcast, I just went and typed in, just online, and just went and typed in Webb Telescope, aliens, extraterrestrials. That's all I typed, Webb Telescope, aliens, extraterrestrials. And I could not believe pretty much the lead story on the Webb Telescope that just went out there. This thing supposedly we can see first light, the Big Bang that created our universe with this thing. I can't even wrap my mind around that, to be honest. But the number one headline associated with the Webb Telescope is that it's going to be the device that discovers extraterrestrial life. Now just Google this. You will see this headline after headline after headline. I would say 2/3 of the videos that I saw, every 2 out of 3 were all about how the Webb Telescope is going to discover aliens and extraterrestrial life. Now again, these things don't happen by accident. NASA has an entire department that their job is to basically get messages across to the public that are important. Everybody and their brother didn't just decide at once to write about, this, multi-billion-dollar telescope. And the thing that we're most excited about is that it's going to find aliens. It's going to find extraterrestrials, right? But yet it's everywhere. This thing is just now receiving photos back. There's not even anything amazing from it back yet. But that's all everybody is talking about in relation to this telescope, is that this is going to be the piece of equipment that does it. Now, isn't it interesting that right after we have this, full-on information dump about UFOs, right after, all these pieces of footage come out and David Fravor's out there, on every possible play. I thought David Fravor didn't like press, right? That was his big thing in the beginning, is I don't like press. I don't like doing press. I can't find, an outlet that this guy hasn't done press. I mean, he has told this story over and over again. I mean, he went on Rogan, for almost 3 hours and talked about this. And he hated it so much, he hated press so much that he turned around and went on Lex Fridman's show and, did that for hours and hours on end. It just cracks me up. Everything, same thing with, Bob Lazar. And I love the Bob Lazar story. Like I said, I think he probably is his own worst enemy. But, these guys, they hate the press. They just hate it. They don't want to talk to the press. It's just, that's not why that's not why they're bringing this out. That's not why they talked about it. They never wanted the press, but yet they're everywhere in the press. Everywhere. I mean, Bob Lazar has been on so many shows. I mean, nothing compared to David Fravor, but, as far as last year goes, but, all of these guys. And right after, this tranche of information comes out, these 3 different videos plus the Omaha video, which is the triangles that enveloped the Omaha. It's a military ship, basically. And there's this night shot footage of these triangles flying in the air with flashing lights. There's something about that footage that never stuck with me as something all that weird. I'm gonna have to look into that more. I'm talking about the green night shot footage of the triangles. First of all, they keep talking about that there's triangles, but that's not what you see. You see a triangle, and then you see like a shadow of it as well, and it's a digital shadow. And then they go to, they have this footage from outside, but then somebody was filming from the inside with an iPhone.
There is new video of a possible encounter. This footage of a radar seen by sailors aboard the USS Omaha back in 2019 shows as many as 14 UFOs swarming the ship off the coast of San Diego. At least one of the objects was moving upwards of 160 miles per hour.
Oh, actually 38 now. It's not fast.
That one's pretty much perfectly 000 relative, right?
Yeah.
263 at 3 miles, 55 knots speed.
Investigative filmmaker Jeremy Corbell says the clip verifies a prior video he released of the same incident.
Now, you tell me, you're on the USS Omaha, which is supposed to be one of the most deadly warships that we have, one of the most advanced in our entire fleet, and someone could just whip out an iPhone and just film footage of UFOs swarming this boat, and someone just flips out an iPhone and just starts filming in front of everybody, and then that footage somehow makes its way to Jeremy Corbell. I don't know. There's something about the Omaha footage that does not sit well with me. That's all I'm saying. And I've said the same thing about the other 3 pieces of footage. The only thing about those that bother me is that, the stories, David Fravor's story is awesome, but the footage does not show anything that he claims in his story. The footage does not show some large white ship just below the water, making almost like white bubbles or white caps above it. The footage does not show that. It does not show the Tic Tac bouncing around at 90-degree angles and taking off like a bullet out of a gun. It doesn't show any of that. It doesn't show, the Tic Tac coming down from 80,000 feet to just above the water in a second. The same thing with the other footage. None of the other footage, demonstrates what the pilots are saying. But maybe that's just because they have better footage and they just wanted to release just enough to capture our attention and then drive it home, with the stories from the pilots. I don't know. But I guess what's interesting is right after the government releases all of this footage and all of these, Lieutenant Graves, Fravor, all these pilots step forward and they give their stories. And then since then, there's been, more sightings, more bizarre things have happened. And then right after that, this incredible telescope is finished by NASA, who never has any money, but suddenly has billions of dollars to build this Webb Telescope. And once it's up in the air, the first thing that everybody wants to talk about is that it's going to find extraterrestrial life. Again, please Google Webb Telescope, extraterrestrial, and alien, or Webb Telescope, alien life. Just Google it and just watch the stories that come up. And it is just story after story after story. So it almost seems like the first thing that happened to us is that we were, preconditioned for this. That the government was watching us and seeing, how we handle this information. Because until it happens, you never know. And it happened in the last couple of years. There was a concern for a long time that, if our government came out and said, hey, these things are aliens, or we believe we found contact, that people would freak out. That they would just absolutely freak the fuck out. And I see why they were concerned with this. Although I don't believe that people would freak out, I can see why there would be concern that people would. mean, the biggest thing it changes is history. And what I mean by history is it changes religion. And I could see why governments would be concerned with how well, the public act if suddenly we, were in contact with extraterrestrials and, just say, for example, they came here long before us. Say they had a history that preceded the times documented in the Bible, or they happened at a different time, and they came here at a time that disproves something, in the Bible or in the Quran or anything like that. And then we hear that NASA had hired something like a dozen or 24 theologians and religious clergy to really try to get an idea on what would happen if they announced that they had made contact. That makes sense to me that they would do that. But again, just think about the timing right now. So we just spend, 2.5 years of conditioning. Right now, think how many people who had never given UFOs even a thought, suddenly now feel like it's okay to say, yeah, they probably exist. And then think of how many believers were made good. Like, right? How many people who said, yeah, I know it's real, I know it's real. Suddenly the government comes out and said, yes, it's real. Yes, it's real. Which, for the record, I do think it's real as far as, contact being made or seeing strange things in the sky that no one, can make heads or tails out of them. But I believe that not from anything that happened in the last 2 years, not from those government pieces of footage. I believe that because stories of, UFOs started coming out right about the time that nuclear warheads came about. And what's always made sense to me about if we are visited, look, once you have a nuke, you graduate from being, man killers to planet killers. That's something that can affect the universe. Nuclear weapons can affect the universe. I mean, Russia's Tsar Bomba was the biggest nuke that was ever let off, and if you see that footage, that is something else. Just go Google that. Russia, TSAR, Tsar Bomba, and watch that footage. That is God power. And the nukes that are out there now, they say, are 800 times stronger than that footage. So would it make sense to me if I'm another species and I, am out there in the universe and I know, where we are and what we're doing, and I know that we've suddenly, got smart enough that we learned how to split atoms, make bombs, and into planets. Would it make sense that they would be monitoring us and visiting us? I think so. It is my opinion that I think, yes, that makes sense. I hear a lot of arguments like, hey, we didn't even know what these things look like, man. We wouldn't even know what they were. Life will certainly be different in other planets. And, these things may be made out of light, and that's it. We wouldn't even know. Or maybe they're made out of sound. Or maybe, man, maybe all those things are true. I have no idea what an alien looks like or how they would operate. But I want to beg this question. Now really think about this. What if life, an intelligent life, throughout the universe, is like us? What if this is what it looks like? This is what life looks like. When life becomes, when it advances to a state of intelligence, or at least more intelligence than any other, animal on the planet. What if we are what it looks like? Bipedal, 2 arms, 2 legs. Maybe the variance is how small or tall are they? How bigger are their brains. Maybe those are the variances. But what if life just looks like us, and it's the same everywhere? That you have to the the building blocks of protein, and you have to have water, and you have to. But it advances, and eventually it gets to a stage where it looks like us. What if it's the same throughout the universe? What if it's not? Some ultra bizarre life form that we can't see or understand. What if it's just more advanced? Like, what if there is a race that's, like us, and I don't mean, like Americans or something, or, I mean just humans, in rudimentary this form, like us, like somewhere out there in the universe. What if there are, bipedal, walking around humans, but say they're a million years past us. Say they're 100,000 years past us. Say they're 100 years older than us. Think how much more advanced they would be. What if they already mastered, space and time bending and portals, and they could travel anywhere in the universe in a fraction of a second. Supposedly, the fabric of space-time, could allow this. Now, I'm not Einstein, so I can't tell you how, or, I'm certainly not a scientist, but as quick as we are to say, especially the skeptical minded, to say, oh, well, if there were aliens, we wouldn't even be able to, speak to them or communicate. We wouldn't even know how. We wouldn't even know what they look like. They'd be so different than us. And what if that's just not the case? What if this, like I said, what if this is what life looks like us? And the reason I ask that is, I said this a while ago, and the more and more I've thought about this, the more and more I believe it to be true. Is maybe it's exactly what George Knapp said. Maybe it's not that, they've come to visit us. Like, we always look at it that way. Like, at some point, the aliens are going to land on the front lawn of the White House and introduce themselves. And, how many times we've heard people say that? I'll believe in aliens when they land on the White House lawn. What if it's like George Knapp said? What if it's not a matter of them coming to visit us if they've already been here? Because it's always made sense to me that human beings, we're just so unlike every other animal in the world. We're just so different. We're so different than everything out there. And human beings clearly don't seem to have the same connection with I Mother Earth, man. They don't. We just don't. Humans as a whole, not I'm sure there are people who connect with the world, and there are people who connect with the soil and nature and all that stuff. But by and large, we have proven over and over again that the human beings as a race, we don't have much of a connection with our planet because we're more than happy to destroy it. And we've been doing it. We've been doing it for a very long time, without pause, without concern, without care or justification. We want something, we do it, right? I mean, that doesn't strike anybody as odd. I mean, to me, that just seems extremely odd. Extremely odd. I think back to when there was that terrible tsunami that just leveled Phuket, Thailand. And I watched several documentaries about it because I was just fascinated by what happened. But at the end of one documentary, it talks about how hardly any animals, were killed during that tsunami. I think no birds were lost, only like a couple of dogs, and that's because they were like chained up and stuff. It was this crazy story I watched, how hardly any animals died, because they knew. After going, years and years and tens of years and Hundreds of years, like all this time without seeing a tsunami, the second the water recedes back into the ocean, the animals knew. They knew. They had this connection with the earth, and they knew, get to highland. Go to where you'll be safe. What did we as human beings do? Go watch the footage from Phuket. Everybody that was like on vacation, they walked out into it. They walked out into the shallow water and started picking up, little seashells and all this shit. Literally walking into what in a matter of seconds is going to be a raging tsunami. Because we just had no connection to the earth. I've always found that to be really, really interesting. And if you look at, human beings historically, if you go backwards, especially to Egypt, you find the same general type of thought to a degree is this love of gold. That has always existed, the love of gold. Why has there always been, the mining of, gold? A process of, stripping the earth of its minerals. This has always existed with human beings. With human beings, of course. You never hear about other, animals in nature just, raping and pillaging the earth for whatever it wants and desires. Like, all other animals typically, if left on their own, live in harmony. We're the ones who make entire gyres of plastic in the ocean that just, are slowly and surely destroying our oceans, which I think is very important to what we're talking about in regard to the UFOs. I just watched this mind-blowing interview with the former Director of Defense, Christopher Mellon. He is the guy that's working with Blink-182, Tom DeLonge, To the Stars. Chris Mellon has been on all the talk shows, but he just did this interview. 2 weeks ago, he just did this interview on the Rising morning show. Now, there's two things that he did that I thought were incredibly interesting if you compare his interviews now to all interviews that took place last year. Do you remember nobody wanted to say last year, aliens? No one wanted to say it, right? Interview after interview after interview, whether it was, DeLonge, which he only did early interviews, I guess, or Lou Elizondo, Jeremy Corbell. Like when it came to people saying, what are we looking at? They would say, well, it's either, our enemies, which we don't think it is, or it's other. And they would say, well, what is other? And all of them would sit there and go, well, other means we just need more research. It could be something else unique. And everyone's, almost everybody who interviewed these guys were doing the same thing. They're going, well, hold on, man. Like, it's either us, and you're saying it's not, or it's our enemies, and you're saying it's not, but yet you're saying this is technology. This is not like he discovered some new fern. I mean, this is a thing that's put together, that's flying through the sky, that, from the statements of our best pilots, these things can smoke us, man. Just bring heat that we can't even fathom. And your answer is other? Nobody wanted to say it, right? Nobody wanted to say it. And the whole time, a question that I had, that many of you had, that I think everybody had, is where the hell's the Air Force in this? Why is it the Navy that's, who's responding? The Navy, all these stories came from the Navy. And I know part of that is naval aviators. Well, why is that important? I think it's important because the water is important. George Knapp finally said it. It took, after all those specials, all those interviews, all those chances, all those guys had, Lou Elizondo, Chris Mellon, George Knapp, all those guys, finally, in the TMZ interview, finally Harvey presses George Knapp, because he keeps saying other. And he's finally like, listen, man, no, what's other? And he finally just says, extraterrestrials. And he presses him further. And he eventually, Knapp says, well, listen, maybe they're not coming here. Maybe they've already been here. Maybe they've been here long before us. And maybe they come from the water. And it was like ding, 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 ding. Like that just made total sense to me. Almost all of these sightings are above water. I mean, during Younger Dryas, about 12,800 years ago, the face of the Earth was completely remapped with what they believe now was a massive, massive collision between, comets and that flew through and smashed the Earth. I think it's up around Greenland. But it completely remapped the Earth, and it was a reset. We have no idea what is out there underneath those oceans. We have no idea. And so much of history was erased during Younger Dryas. Like it remapped the face of the Earth. And as time goes by, we're slowly learning through places like, Göbekli Tepe and all that stuff that our immediate history goes back further than we thought. And there's a whole other hidden history that goes way back further than we thought that was destroyed. So we don't know what happened in our past. We don't really know. But this takes me to this Chris Mellon interview with Rising. After all that time last year of nobody wanting to say what exactly is going on, in this single interview, Chris Mellon basically says, yeah, where's the Air Force in all this? It appears as though, basically, he said, it could be plausible that the Air Force isn't talking because they know more. They have more information. They know what's up there. Because maybe when these things are happening, we sent our best pilots, which come from the Air Force. Maybe they went out to deal with whatever these things are, and they don't want to talk about it. But what's interesting is Mellon basically says this. Watch this footage right here.
And while the government is seemingly taking the issue seriously, there's one military branch that has seemed to have gone AWOL on the issue, the United States Air Force. Former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense Christopher Mellon joins us now to discuss. Christopher, thank you so much for joining the show. So, first of all, why do you think the Air Force is not really saying much about this? I mean, this seems to be pretty big news.
Yeah, it's baffling. And from the beginning, it's been the U.S. Navy. It's been Navy videos. It's been Navy reports. They've been very quiet. There's been a traditional stigma in the Air Force. I think that's part of it. But this lack of responsiveness to this degree is rather baffling.
And do you think, what do you think explains that silence? Is it just is there genuinely something that is being covered up, or is it a kind of bureaucratic, well, we don't have to be transparent with you, who are you, we're the government, that kind of thing?
Yeah, so we don't know, but it does cause you to wonder if perhaps they're covering something up, because they released a report in 2015 identifying 1,800 incidents between 2010 and 2015 of unknown tracks of interest. Now this report comes forward and they seem to have virtually nothing to say and nothing to contribute. We know that F-15s have been scrambled. That's press reporting. We know that NORAD has hundreds of unknowns every year in the atmosphere and thousands in space. It's rather bizarre that they claim, the UAP task force, they're still trying to get information from the Air Force after all these months.
And what's even more interesting is finally, Mellon even says what makes the most sense is aliens, extraterrestrials. Watch this footage.
So can you tell us from your perspective, what's the chance that these unidentified aerial phenomenon, they are our own military, maybe our own secret weaponry, maybe being developed even in the private sector alongside the military? What are the chances it's a foreign military versus the chances that it's actual alien?
Well, it's very interesting. The report submitted by the Director of National Intelligence said we see no evidence that it's from a foreign government. None of the instances, the 144 incidents they identified, could be explained by U.S. classified research programs. So that leaves you wondering then what hypothesis best fits the facts. And frankly, the alien hypothesis fits the facts better than the alternatives. I'm afraid I have to say that.
Now think how different that is now compared to last year, where nobody wanted to say it. For some reason, I don't know if they still thought they would be like crucified for it, but last year nobody wanted to say it. Nobody. And now here's Mellon right away just going, yeah, it makes the most sense. It would be extraterrestrial. But I think the reason that, in my opinion, and obviously these are just opinions, I could be dead wrong, but I think the primary reason that we're not hearing from the Air Force is not that they have some big secret. I just think it comes from the water. I mean, that's where these things go to and from. And there's been, countless eyewitness reports of it right out here between myself and Catalina Island. 1992, over 300 objects were seen coming from the water, and they flew right over the Santa Monica Mountains. So now that the Webb Telescope is out there, and now that we're all being told this thing is going to find aliens, it's going to find them. Now that that's going on, now Chris Mellon, arguably the most powerful voice in this entire movement, is openly pressing the government harder, openly saying it could be aliens. This just feels like the next phase is starting to take shape. And we're starting to see what the last 2 years were about. I think it was about conditioning. And I think some heavy stuff is going to be coming down the pipeline here real soon. I think 2022 is going to be a huge year for the UFO phenomenon. I do think we're going to hear, and this is just, my opinion, I do think we're going to, hear something from this Webb telescope about extraterrestrial life. It just seems too perfect. Right after we are, basically given all this information to test how we will respond to it, here's NASA, ding, we got this massive thing, and the headline, the Webb telescope, and the headline everywhere is that it's going to find extraterrestrials. And suddenly, the Chris Mellons of the world are not afraid to say, yeah, we think it's aliens. It just seems to all be happening. It just seems to all be happening. Let me know what you guys think about all this in the comments below, please. Also, if you haven't subscribed to the podcast, please do. If you enjoy the podcast and you want to support us at Patreon, please click our Patreon link in the description box below. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode of the In a Crowded Room podcast. I'll be back tomorrow with more. All the best.